Radio. Welcome to the podcast of the Composition and Music Theory Department of the Karol Szymanowski Music Academy in Katowice.
Philippe Manoury, bienvenue au Szymanowski Radio, and that is my French. Welcome to Szymanowski Radio. I'd like very much to start with you introducing yourself. You're a composer, that's what I can tell already, but if you could tell more about that, how you became a composer and what are your fields of interest and all that stuff.
Yes. Oh, it was a strange story because I began not because a composer, but I began in the music because I was not comfortable with school. I hated school, and for me, the music was a sort of refuge, a way to escape from the world of school. So I began to take piano lessons, and then. But I remember when I began to read music, I began to write at the same time. It was always something which, I don't know why, but it was always something which I had in mind to write music. And but in the beginning, I was only working on the piano and composing for myself, some little essays, some little thing. But I met some people which introduced me in the world of contemporary music. And for example, I was studying with a student of Max Deutsch. Max Deutsch was a student of Schoenberg. Mm-hmm. So after that, Max Deutsch was my teacher. But it was a student of Schoenberg in the Vienna period, not in the US period. Mm-hmm. That if he was living now, he should have 150 years. It was an old man. So I was his student for a couple of years. And I realized after a moment that the career of a pianist was not good for me because it was too competitive and and some people were playing much better than me. And so the composition took a lot of importance for me. And I studied, I will say I was a sort of autodidact for a long time before. I have composed a long time before taking lessons of composition. And then I entered in the Conservatoire de Paris for 4 years, only 4 years. So I didn't have a long, I will say long period of time as a student in composition. Yeah. But the first piece which was important for me to compose was a piano piece which I composed for a French pianist which was Claude Elfer. I don't know if you know, but he died many years ago, but in that time he was the main specialist of the music by Boulez, Stockhausen, Xenakis, and Boku-Reslieff, and so he asked me to compose a piece for him. So I did it, and that was a piece which was make me a little bit known in the world. And I began to compose a piece when I was 19, and I finished that when I was 21.
You composed this for 2 years, the piano piece.
Yeah, yes. It was a very experimental piece in playing inside the piano. I was looking for some experimental element. And that for slowly I began to compose chamber pieces, and but I was always attracted by orchestral music. But I didn't write a really orchestral music before I was, I think, 28 and 27, because I didn't have access. I did a soft essay when I was in the Conservatoire de Paris, but it was not very interesting for me. And one thing which was important for me, it was also the discovery of electronic music. because I was very attracted by electronic music, but I didn't like the way it was done in France. That is the group de musique concrète, Pierre Schaeffer, and because it was for me very far off my background, which was a classical background, because I studied counterpoint, harmony, and so and so. And in that time, the electronic music was from those people totally intuitive. There is no theory, no idea of form. It was totally intuitive. From time to time, it has been interesting. There were some good things, but it was not what I was looking for. I was looking for some things which could me understand how it's work, the composing for electronic music. And finally, the guy which was most important for me in that time was Stockhausen, because he showed me that it's possible to be a composer in instrumental world and in electronic world in the same times.
To combine the world.
Yes, and it was a unique person doing that, because in France, people like, for example, Pierre Boulez never touched, or he didn't has a big interest in electronic music in that time. And people which were working in electronic music, they was unable to write for instruments because they have no knowledge of that. So Stockhausen was very important for me. And I never took a lesson with him, but I met him from time to time, because when he was in Paris, or when I was in Germany for some times, I met him. And it was for me a sort of example. And after that, another composer, two other composers was interesting for me, was Boulez, of course, because I read his books and I studied his score, but I didn't know him personally in that time because he was living in the US. He was a conductor in New York Philharmonic at that time. So I never met him when I was very young, but I met Xenakis. I met several times Xenakis because he was living in Paris.
Yeah.
So I met him, and I was also interested by using mathematics or theory or probabilities in the music. So Xenakis was a sort of example. Not exactly, his music was not very important for me, but the idea to use other kind of models which are not unique, only musical, but introducing mathematical models into music was very important. And I was in fact so when I was in conservatoire, I tried to use electronic music, but it didn't work for me in that time because what I said before.
What attracted you in the first place in electronic music? What was the attraction?
It's for example to do something which was impossible to do with instruments. That just an example, spatialization of the sounds, and to create timbres and create musical structures which are not possible. Continuum or a lot of things which is absolutely impossible to do with instruments. We can approach, but it was this division in between electronic and instrumental. And since this time, in fact, until today, I can say that my goal is in fact to merge the both in the same way. That means because I have composed a lot of pieces for instrumental music and electronic, and it was always my goal to try to find a way to make possible that those two kind of music speak the same language. Yeah, that was. And in fact, I began to work in IRCAM right in the beginning in 76. I was in IRCAM, but I lived for a while in Brazil.
In Brazil?
Yes, yeah. I was in Brazil because my one of my teacher was a professor in Sao Paulo and invited me And I was in Brazil. In fact, I was married with a Brazilian woman at that time, and I lived for 2 years in Brazil. And when I came back in France, IRCAM was already there, and I have sent them a project of research. And I was thinking the progress will never been accepted, but in fact they were very interested. So I began to work in IRCAM, and since that time I am involved in this kind of music. But in fact I am the son of digital music. I never experiment just a little bit the old techniques with the scissors and the old technique of tape music, but I began in the beginning of the digital music, computer music was.
But if I understand it correctly, your interest in electronic music is not pure electronic music, but electronic devices interacting with the musicians, with the interpreter.
Exactly.
And there's actually you were talking about Boulez. There's a short, I watched it before our interview, a short video of Boulez talking about you and your common interest in the living the living musician. And that is what I believe is what is your field.
Well, that's true, because it was problematic for me that in the same time I was attracted by the sound of electronic music and the possibilities, and in the same times I was disappointed by the fact, for example, we couldn't change the tempo. If the acoustic is different, we could change the tempo. We could do fermatas, acceleration, and the fixity of tape music was always difficult for me. So for that reason, when I work in IRCAM, and I work with very interesting people, and we develop a lot of tools, in fact, to combine, for example, score following or analysis of the sound of the voice or the sound of the instruments. So you are absolutely right. My interest is to have electronic music plus or in the same time as vocal or instrumental music. Yes, I have done some piece just electronic, very few. I have done a sort of installation recently, but no, it's for me. I don't like to sit to go in concert hall and to sit and to look at loudspeakers. For me, there are no interest. And I like the idea of the concert, because the concert is the psychology of the musicians who speaks. You write the score, and there's an interpreter, a performer, which will do something different each time. And for me,
that's a topic. I think that's pretty in discussion right now. I think with artificial intelligence creating content, and that I remember when this first visual program DALL-E appeared, that people were very interested in it for like 1 month, 2 months, and now the interest has rapidly deceased. And one interpretation of that was that that for us it's still very important to have like this human interaction, that there is a performer, that is a person who created this, there is a story, a personal story. And I think that's the same what you say about the loudspeakers. If you go to a concert, only loudspeakers, it's kind of anonymous.
Yes.
Impersonal.
Yeah. And of course we can say, well, we can listen to a CD or something like that, but if you want to have, for example, in my room here, I have 6 loudspeakers. So if I want to do a surround sound or spatialization, you have to go in a place where there's a lot of loudspeakers. But if there is nothing to see, if it is totally, for me, it's not exciting at all. Yeah.
On the other side, like people go in masses to the cinema, and this is also in a way a dead art. So it's not like the theater.
It's not like a theater, but you can see people acting.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
true. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's altogether. Sorry, and that's altogether a point I wanted to ask about is you're on the one side you are very interested in technology, in live electronics, and like you might also develop on the history that Max MSP was developed because it was developed for you.
Yeah.
That's one of the big stories. So maybe start with that. Tell us about how this came to be.
It's begun because I became very close friend until now there with Miller Puckett, which was the scientist which invented Max MSP. And in that time, what it was exciting for me, it was really the beginning of real-time music. When I said the beginning, I must say it was no library, for example. You have very few programs of synthesis, but we had to construct to invent the complete world. And it was like beginning a new world from nothing. Of course, we knew what it is around ring modulator or reverberation, spatialization. Of course, it was existing, but we have invented a lot of new element in the technology. And in fact, the research was developing in the same time as the composition. When I was composing, I thought, oh, for example, from this moment, I would like to do this kind of thing with the sounds. It is not possible. So Miller Puckett changed the algorithm and changed the program to adapt this for what I wanted to do. And it was always doing the same time, constructing the system and composing the piece. And we did 4 pieces in IRCAM, which are pioneering, in fact, the sort of pioneer of electronic music. It is Jupiter for flute, Pluton for piano, Neptune for percussion, and Echo for voice and with real-time music. And for me, it was very exciting. But, the problem is this world is a world which is always in evolution, and it never will be stable. That means it's like if you have to learn a new solfege each 3 or 5 years, because the old system is finished, and you have to. So what is important is to have a culture of electronic music, like to understand what is the basic of the things. But for example, it's clear that in that time I was very capable to do that by myself, to make programmation, and it was not a problem for me because I spent a lot of time in doing that. But I lose it because now all the system have changed. And if I wanted to be up to date, I will not have time to compose. Simply.
That's very, very interesting that you say that, because I remember when we were studying Max MSP during our studies, this was the thing that I thought immediately, that if I go this direction, I will have to invest so much time in in this programming and being like not a composer but a computer engineer.
Yeah.
That I pretty soon I decided that despite the rich possibilities that come with electronic music, that I decided I don't want to go that path, because I realized how much time investment this means, and I wanted to invest this time and investment in music, in composing music for only instrumentals and singers.
Yeah. But it's the thing is, in fact, if we have a culture of electronic music, it's much easier. That means for young people which are younger than you, for example,
Yes.
which are 16 years old, and they are born in this world, and they will be much more active and much more capable that I was, for example. And I think this difficulty will disappear. But in my time, of course, and until now, I know how to do many things with computer. But of course, somebody has to prepare what we call a patch. Somebody has to prepare a patch, and I have to experiment with this. And after that, I can work alone without. But I need help, of course.
Do you collaborate with people that do this engineering?
Yes, for example,
Well,
now
idea.
I began to work again with Miller.
Yeah, okay.
But in my opera, I began to work again with Miller, and he's developing new tools for to modify speaking voice and things like that. So it's always something which is experimental, and we will make a lot of experiment. He come here in Strasbourg. We met in IRCAM in Paris. And after a moment, he will give me the program, and I will continue alone. That's for sure. Yeah.
So, but the point where I was heading was that on the one side you're interested in this electronic music and in technology, and you do programming and stuff like that. But on the other side, you don't write in Sibelius or Dorico.
No,
and this problem is you write by hand all the time, and I find this very fascinating. It's a combination of two worlds, like this in you. What I find in general fascinating in you, that I think you combine like a very modernist and future thinking, and on the other side, traditional conservative in a good sense, attitude to composing based on the tools on the I lose the word now. Warstatt in Polish, the Werkstatt.
No, but because, for example, the problem of the composing with computer is the size of the screen. You know, even if you have a big screen, I have for example, a big score, 55 staves for orchestra. I am working on that now. And I can have a look on the complete score in my, and I can put several score and to have a look on in 5 or 10 page to look at how the music will sound and what is the evolution. So for me, it's a visual aspect which is a problem, and also I must say I work much more quickly by hand than with computer. Yeah.
But have you tried?
Yes, I tried. So I tried, but not. In fact, I tried that I have some tools for them to help me to make sketches, but to realize a complete score, I never go very far. No, it's for me. And of course, I send the score to my publisher. The publisher has copies which do that.
Your comfortable situation and problem is if you don't have a publisher who does this for you. Like for today, the composers are also there. Like in Grafeneck, we had Corina Tübler who came and spoke to us, but that's the reason, because we are also in a way our own publishers, and we have to do the thing. So I admire all the way. I admire doing all the work by hand. That's impressive. with such huge scores that you write for 100 musicians for us. And there are several topics I still like to ask you about. Let's start with something you mentioned before. You leaving of school at the age of 14, if I remember correctly, and that's quite impressive. Like the education that you present with yourself, without like usually people who leave school at the age of 14, they, without being disrespectful, but they can become a technician of car repairers or builder or paint the walls. But you're so educated in many fields, and I think that's very, very impressive. The mathematical knowledge.
Yeah, but I have a lot of lack, like so in mathematics, for example. But for me it was a way to educate myself, and I must say that living in Paris in the 70s was very interesting, because it was a very rich city, plenty of theater, of concert, of books, and of many of information. And it was very helpful for me. If I were living in a country where I was born, for sure.
You were born in the countryside.
I was born in the countryside. Yes, in countryside. I came in Paris at the age of 7. But if I stayed there, for sure, I would not have accomplished what I did.
So you took your education like from the environment that you lived in.
Yeah, exactly. That's from the environment. And I have a brother which a little bit younger than me, but he was in the university, and he has a lot of friends which were doing movie, theater, painting. So I was involved in artistic movement, and in fact I have a lot of contact with musicians around me. So I was not alone. I was involved in a lot of contact. But I would have preferred to work by my own, yes, than to flow. And I was never comfortable, and still now I am not comfortable with school. But when I was teaching in UCSD, I hated to give notes, for example, to rank people.
To rank people, yeah.
It's not for me, so, but we are obliged to do it.
Especially in a field like music, it's inadequate, I would say.
Yeah.
How to rate a composition? Like give it full mark because it looks nice.
Yeah.
On the other side, maybe it is not creative.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not. Yeah. It has no innovative spirit. It's very complicated. I have problems with this as well. In fact, I started to teach in music school. I founded a composition class, and when I wrote to the director about of the school about creating this class, I wrote that I don't want to give marks, because I think it's absolutely it's not okay. It's inadequate to give marks.
Yeah.
Composition. So I understand that hesitant that you have towards this. But mathematics seem a very important thing for you in music.
Or mathematics.
I remember in Grafenegg also you constructed when we met with the other composers, you constructed a little mathematical game to have the order. I like this very much, but I find it also very interesting.
I like the idea. It's like a game, but I like the idea to have constraint, and to define some rules and to follow those rules to see what happens. But what I like is not only mathematics, but I am very close to, I will say, the scientific world, even if I am not scientist myself, of course. I don't pretend it. But what I like in the scientific world, they have to prove what they are doing. It's not to say I have this idea, but they to in fact, if they have a theory, they have to battle this theory against something until to see if this theory is resistant or not.
Yes.
And I think in the art, of course, is not the case. But I think from time to time you should we should follow these directions and not just say, oh, the art is totally, intuitive and there are no rules. And I like this idea to have something which is very rigorous in a way, and to see how these theoretical ideas will resist if we bump into it,
Mm-hmm. I think this relates to the grammatic concept that we have in music. Maybe if you could tell us about that, because it seems to me that it's a way for you to approach form in music and form, sense, and narration.
Narration, not only narration but form for sure.
Form.
And for me, it's in fact, nowadays, I think very few composers are speaking about form. And for me, it's clear that is maybe the most important element, because it's the way how you listen to the music in time. In fact, it's a way to control what you are composing and to control the density or the originality or the quality of your music over the time. We can do that with the form and in thinking of the form. And in fact, it is true that the composer which are most important for me are the composer which add this kind of questions in mind.
How do you approach it more concretely? This, if you could develop on this your musical grammar. You have a phrase that you coined. I don't remember it right now. How grammar something.
It's a generative musical
grammar, exactly.
Generative musical grammar. It's a way, in fact, to control the order of the events at the time. And for example, it's I think it's like in ordinary life. What you say is important, but the moment where you say it is also important. Sometimes you can say a phrase or something, and if it is not the right moment, this phrase will not have the impact you want.
Mm-hmm.
But and I think in music is a little bit like that. Is the musical element itself is important, but the context in which this element is important. And I have no idea, no big clear idea of what the form is, because each form is different. But it's always something which is in my mind when I compose. And because I think what is important, it is the listener should perceive there is a form, there is a structure, but it is interesting when he could analyze what is going on. When the form is too obvious, too simple, and too direct, I think it's a failure for me.
Mm-hmm.
I like when you understand there should be something which organizes this world, but you don't know exactly how it is. But of course, if these things were not present, that would be audible clearly.
Yeah, but I think that the basic idea is very important. That if you listen to classical or romantic music or Baroque music, you have a sense of where you are in the piece. And I remember very often in concerts, I get a feeling of excitement when I feel, it's near, it's coming to the culmination, or it's coming to the end.
Yeah, yes, of course. There's
if I have this in any piece, I think this is a very important feeling in music in general.
Yes, but for example, this kind of thing began much more difficult from Debussy, for example. With Debussy, from time to time, it's difficult to say, "Oh, we are going to the end." Of course, it's possible, but it's always surprising. And I like this idea in which we don't know always where we are, but we perceive there is something which is in the background. But we cannot analyze, we cannot say, okay, I understand how it is constructed, but the form is for me is very important, and from time to time the form is decided before the writing the piece. For example, I showed them in fact, when I was in Grafenegg, my grammar, musical generative grammar. I have composed a violin concerto, and that the form was totally decided in the beginning. But when I said the form, I knew it will be element, one element, the other, and the construction. But in fact, the character of the music was not included in this.
So I remember this. In fact, I have the notes about your lecture about that in Happneck. And so where you taught about the generative grammar and the relation of motives, the interaction of motives, and what my question then, and it is maybe still, is how do you bring that into a synthesis with something that is still very basic for me, like the intuition of composing, but because it seems very technical and very like this pre-composition phase seems very, very strict. How do you? But on the other side, it's also for me this: if you have in the pre-composition phase, if you have a goal or a task that you set yourself, it's also something that you battle as a composer with. And I find this is very creative because it produces a kind of energy. But how is this for you? Like this, how do you bring this synthesis with intuition or this basic musicianship?
Yes, but if it is something, if I decide to have a sort of abstract form, something which is pre-composed in a way, and okay, I will follow this planning or these things, but more I will compose, more I will know what I want. And I will have more I compose, more I will be able to anticipate what I want and how long the piece will be, and where will be the climax, and I can anticipate how I want to end the piece. And from time to time, if I know how I want to end, for example, let's say we'll end with an adagio or in the higher register or something like that. So that is something which will influence my way to compose. And it appears several times that I modified the plan or the structure in order to, because I think in that case the intuition win. The intuition win because I know I want to finish like that, and I know I will have a brass section here. I know, it's something, and I can explain why I need it, but in fact I need it, and I will, and after I will try to integrate this element in the context. And the other thing is I quite never compose in the time of the piece. It's always in the beginning.
That I have seen in an interview with you as well. So I think a lot of people write from A to Z, like from the beginning to the end. But you were talking about, it was the flute concerto, Saccades, and that you compose various things at the same time.
Yes.
And you felt that through this, the piece is more together.
Yeah.
But maybe that, because I think that's also a debate for a lot of composers, like this approach that I've personally got the feedback that the piece will not be integrated, because I sometimes have the same attitude that I compose beginning, I compose the end, I compose something in the middle, and then I make it grow together, or try to make it together. But I've got that this loses form, and I don't know.
For example, in
the way I found a brother soul in what you say about this.
in the violin concerto, for example, I remember I have composed this. There is a perpetuum mobile, and I have composed this section, or making sketches, maybe not totally composed. And I thought that would be a sort of not climax, but big section, which will stay for maybe 7 or 6 or 8 minutes long. And in fact, when I knew this section would be part of the concerto, I have to introduce this element before, in order to prepare to go there. So it's always I modify. So I have composed this piece, but after I will compose what is before the piece. After, it's the reverse order. You are A and B, and you have composed B, but after you will deduce A from B. But in the time of the music, you will have A and B, but the way to compose in the reverse order. And it is, in fact, to introduce this element and to create something which is organic. One thing was important for me. It was something that has to do with nature, for example. Maybe I told you before, but it's when I was traveling in the US, and you have like a desert, something very dry, and you can see one moment one tree, and you say that is very strange because there's no water, or one tree or one flower, something which is. But the rest of the landscape is totally dead, and you go, and after that you can see there are other trees, there's other flowers, other plants, and after that you have a forest. You change. That it is because there is something I think in under the earth which gives the possibility to have one flower or one tree in a very desertic element. But you can see the structure because it's hidden. But if the tree is there, it's because there is a reason. And it's a sort of announcement that later, in fact, the quality of the texture of the earth will change because it should be under the surface, some water and something like that. So when I composed that, I had always this idea we can expose very foreigner elements, but this element should be like a tree in the desert. That means later you will understand why this element was there. And that is a sort of relationship with the nature, which is important for me, because it's organic. I cannot say. I try to find a sort of organicity in music.
We are speaking about two concertos, or pieces that you might call concertos, the violin concerto and the flute concerto. And that leads us to another topic, the question of the orchestra today. I think that's like of the three main topics for you.
Yeah,
we have talked about live electronic music. We didn't still talk about the opera. And the orchestra. That your idea is to renew the idea of the orchestra. If I understand that correctly, you perceive the orchestra as a construct of the like the orchestra now is basically the same construction as the Mannheim Orchestra from
exactly. Yeah.
If you could tell us about your ideas that you have and the projects that you realized.
I think the main idea for me is to has something to do with the concept of hierarchy.
Sorry to stop you, because another topic I wanted to point out is an interest in let's call it politics in music. And I find this topic, and in fact, when you talked about hierarchy, I find this very political. So
yes, it's of course, because it's it's a sort of utopian idea of a society in which some human groups will not have a relationship in terms of hierarchy, but in terms of complementarity. But inside the groups, it should have a hierarchy, of course, because some people are more experimented than others, are older or are more imaginative. I am nothing against hierarchy in all the domains, but the idea to have a society in which some groups could have the leadership in one field, but not for example, in all the fields, and in which the leadership could change. Of course, it will be difficult to do that, but in fact, we try to go there, because this pyramidal hierarchy is really boring now, because we have a lot of difficulty to change it. And I think the orchestra is sort of reflect of the society, because I would like, for me, the important thing is to have different groups which are first non-hierarchical. That means each group has the same importance. It's not like the romantic orchestra in which the strings are the kings and the percussion is from time to time. For me, I try to break this hierarchy, and also to have some grouping of instruments which are not homogeneous, as we could have a society in which the grouping of the people are not only the same, the same kind of people. I would say Caucasian or black or Asian or so of course it's influenced by politics idea. But I think if we think like that, we will do musical elements which are totally different. And it's a way to make discovery, because if you combine, now I am working a piece for Japan, and I have one block which is strings, violin, woodwinds, violin, brasses, viola, and not behind, but after that is a double bass, and I have the same structure in front of the other, the violin, woodwinds, and in fact I could have a mixture of timbres because they are seated together, and the idea is I want to create a sort of synthesis sound, like a fusion of the sounds. And of course, if we mixture the people together and the instrument together, we could obtain more fusional timbres than if we are in different families. So I think for me, of course, it could have a sort of political idea in this sense. But in fact, I think for me, it's opened some new possibilities, sonic possibilities, yes, for sure. So I try to compose pieces like that, but I cannot do that all the time, of course, because the problem that's
the problem with innovation. Like
yeah.
Like I remember very much when I was sitting at a music festival, and I had the idea to compose a violin concerto with 3 violins, like 1 central violin and 2 shadow violins.
Yeah.
So, but on the same festival, a friend of mine composed a very similar piece. That he had a string orchestra piece, and he had 3 violins. I think it was 3 violins on the other side. And now you composed a piece for clarinet and orchestra with 2 shadow clarinets. So
Clarinet, yeah.
idea, you maybe I composed the piece anyway.
Yes, of course.
But in a way, I think the problem with this also, like the piece that you composed for Cologne. We have the 11th of November. It's a very important day in Cologne because it's the start of Carnival. It's the most important holiday in Cologne. This piece Ring, where the musicians around the orchestra. So this is the spatial idea. You have a spatial idea that you have also in other pieces like Anticipation, for example. But on the same time, you have the idea that the challenging of the idea of a concert, that the musicians play. Maybe you tell about it. It's your piece.
It's something I saw in some theater companies where you enter in the theater and the actors are already on stage and speaking in between them, and there's the curtain open, and so and in fact you don't know when it begins. And I decided to have that, in fact, to have a sort of transition in between, which is musical and non-musical, because the performer go on stage and they warm up and they do scales and arpeggio.
In the score, did you instruct them to warm up in a certain way, or
yes, from this bar to this bar, you can do what you want. But when there is some numbers in which they are obliged to play composed music, and in the beginning, the composed music is very rare from some spot like that, very short. And little by little, it becomes more and more dense. And in fact, the informal music will disappear progressively into structured music, a sort of texture, I would say. Not really a music, but sort of texture, but a texture which is harmonically developed or installed, it's not. And in fact, you have a sort of magma and something chaotic, and slowly, you understand that the music is taking birth from that and something stable. And when this texture is installed, the conductor go on stage, on the podium, and begin the piece to compose. So it is a transition in between, which is chaotic and which is constructed, or where begins the music. That is a big question, philosophical for me, but not for that piece, but in general, what is the boundaries of music? For example, if you go, for example, let's give me an example. I was always fascinated by the language of Sweden to listen. I have seen a lot of film by Bergman, for example. And for me, I don't understand one word in Sweden. It's totally... And when I listen to Sweden, it sounds like music for me, because I don't know what they are speaking about, but it's the color of the sounds, of the vowel, the rhythm. And I am fascinated because I listen and I hear that as a sort of musical texture. And of course, if I were student, it has been totally different. So for me, the music begins there, Sweden, or I can say other languages, Japanese, or what you want. But the question where begins the music is very important. And of course, we are when I am composing music with electronic music, I can introduce concrete sounds. For example, I did a melody and its structure with the noise of a camera, for example, because the text was about photography. So
wouldn't you say that the one thing that needs to be true is that it needs to be intentional. Like, for example, people say birds sing, but it's not really singing what they.
No, for us it's singing, yes.
Yeah, because we perceive it like Swedish.
Yeah, yes. And I have read some books about bird. They when they sing, they say basically, "This is my wife and this is my home," and don't come in my home because it belongs to me. Donc it is not poetic at all.
Yeah.
Very, very.
But it's also interesting about the relationship of the creator and the perceiver.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Like,
but
as something musical, which it from the bird perspective, it is not.
Yes. But for example, to answer this question, where begins the music? I think the correct answer is for me. The music begins where I want the music begin. If I want to listen a noise as a musical event, of course, and if I know that musically, it's music.
It depends on the listener.
Yes, of course, and the disposition of the listener of his mind. Yeah.
Yes, sure. Like, I agree with that. Like, for example, the sound, I very like to listen to the sound of waves, which are just waves, but I perceive it in an aesthetic way. So
yeah.
I as a listener, you could say I make music of it.
Yes, of course.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
But of course, when it is a language, if you understand the meaning, of course, you can be touched by the meaning because you understand what is. But in fact, if you do not understand the meaning, you listen that only from aesthetical point of view, and not semantic.
Yeah. Maybe coming back to the orchestra and the ways you treat it, there's a thing that I recognize in your scores reappearing is the implementation of things that we call in Poland controlled aleatoricism. Like in the scores of
Lutosławski, you mean? Yeah.
That you have aleatoric events, like the musicians have notes that are predefined, but they play them independently in an organized way. Like it creates, of course, some harmonic texture or some harmonic. So there is an organization level, but there's also a freedom level. And I wanted to ask you if there has been in this any influence from Lutosławski or in general the Polish music school, because in Poland the French music has had a very big influence. There are a lot of Polish composers that have been students of Olivier Messiaen and Nadia Boulanger. They are the two big figures of the French music in the 20th century, the teachers. Right. They are very important for Polish composers that learn. And I wanted to ask if Polish composers like Penderecki, Lutosławski, or Henryk Mikołaj-Górecki are of any influence in France or generally in France or personally to you?
Lutosławski is very important. Yes, for me, I think it's the main figure. Penderecki less. I like his first pieces. I have some problem with the last one, but Lutosławski was important, and I think this idea of introducing aleatoric element is very brilliant because it creates something really poetic, and it works very well because it
is inspired by Lutosławski. It is inspired.
Maybe yes, but I couldn't say exactly because I see a lot of other composers. For example, there's a composer in France like Bukurešliev. He's from Bulgarian, but he's French. But I will say I was influenced a lot by computer for that. Because the computer, you are using a lot of aleatoric elements because you cannot decide for every element. And in fact, when it is aleatoric, you have always some surprise because you are not in control of it. And I tried, in fact, to find some musical structure which react as if it was produced by a processor. And you don't know if it will be in the same time, so one after the others. And he created a sort of text. It is a textural system. I will not say it's directly influenced by Lutosławski, but maybe it is, because I have read a lot of.
From my perspective, it looks very similar.
And I
which is not bad.
No, and for me, in that regard, we belong to the same family. Yeah,
and because I've been in a little. I have a little bit of critical situation in the last days that I have thought about this. I've done a lot of this textural building in music, and I found it recently a kind of a trap that I somehow get lost in creating textures, and I lose some other things that I very much admire or need in music, like a clarity of or vision of melody, maybe. Yeah. Do you have the same or the same problem or thinking sometimes the same problems or not at all?
But I'm not sure to understand what
that I realize that I sometimes get lost in texture.
Okay, but I like the idea to get lost, but not for too long time. Mm-hmm. But I like the idea in which we are no more in control, and there's a stuff in the independence. But what is important for me, it is like what I do frequently. It is like if you have a lock, so you open the lock and it's free, and all the musicians play. And after that, you close the lock one by one.
And they come together.
They come together.
That's the same idea in the Lutosławski pieces that he has this Aleatoricism, but then he says, okay, now we are 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Yeah. And it gets a sense of that. It's for me maybe a bit like with the weather. If you have now here in Katowice is the sun coming out, which makes only sense in comparison to the clouds that were before.
Yes. Another piece which has for me influenced was in that regard, not so in music, but in that regard, it was Répond by Boulez, because in that piece I think is very interesting. The conductor is as a group of 30 musicians or 28 musicians, which are playing under his direction, and the soloists are very far and behind, so the soloist could see his gesture and he could synchronize. So he wrote the kind of music in which the soloists are like something which is always free, because they couldn't be synchronized because they are too far. And interesting solution, in fact, in between a music which is totally structured and in a music which is written, but in fact the timing of this music is elastic.
It's elastic. It's not strict. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like this idea of combine rigor or structure with freedom and liberty, and to see what's the relationship in between. That is always something. And Debussy for me was, of course, very, very important, because his music sounds like it was free, totally intuitive. But if you remember what I said,
I remember what you were speaking about. La Mer, you analyze it, that it's very structural. We were talking before about the politicalness of your orchestral ideas, but there are more direct political influences in your music, themes that you have approached. I'm thinking now more precisely about oratorio, lab oratorium, concerning with the refugees and refugee crisis in Europe and the situation on the Mediterranean Sea, and Kein Licht, concerned with the aftermath of the Fukushima nuclear catastrophe. And I think it's a very important subject. I think it's very often that artists evade it in a way to be political. I think it's of course their right to do so, and I think a lot about how political art should be, or if it shouldn't be at all. Like I remember, for example, when I spoke to Péteris Vasks, the Latvian composer, that for him music is very important to give people hope. And I can relate to that as well. So music just can be music. It is, Vasks is in a way also, you could say, a political composer, also considering the circumstances he was living and composing under in Soviet times. But also the soul aspect of music, like an artist or musician, of course, has the right to only create something beautiful, which might be called a political act in itself. But maybe you could tell me about your thinking or your perspectives on that, the politicalness of art in general and your music in particular.
Yeah. But in the two pieces you mentioned, Kein Licht and Laboratorium, are oriented differently. In Kein Licht, I remember when we did Kein Licht, during the rehearsals, we invited scientists, physicists, which in fact the son of my wife is a physicist, astrophysicist, or physician.
I think we know what you mean. Not the doctor.
Yes, not the doctor. Yeah, and to explain for other people what are the issue of nuclear energy, and of course all the actors which were only German actors were totally against nuclear plant. And it creates some conflict in between them, because they didn't want to accept that the only way to protect the ozone, is to have a sort of clean way to. And so in that regard, I don't say that Kein Licht is oriented politically, because I am totally. I cannot say I am against nuclear energy. I cannot say anymore that. When I was younger, I couldn't say, but now I know the issue is very critical. And if we open, for example, Charboil and all those mines, as they are doing in Germany, it's really the bad things. So I cannot take position. I understand we can be afraid, and Fukushima or Chernobyl was another example, much dramatic. But I cannot say I have this orientation. But what I can express is the tension in between that, because in Kein Licht, what we want to express is people are wasting energy and that's destroying the planet. And after that, you have some people like Elon Musk, which want to go in March, and to quit the Earth because the Earth is destroyed. So let go in March to have a new life, and that is the end of Kein Licht. People are going to march. It's a sort of, I can present this tension. I think the music is very strong to carry a sort of tension like that. But it is not a piece which is oriented politically. In the contrary, in Laboratorium, that is the things. And I will not say it's really political. I will say it's more I would say a simple word, but civilizational, is a problem of civilization. And that, of course, when we see that those people are dying in Mediterranean, that, of course, that I am against these things. And that my point of view is very clear. But I cannot explain in which direction or how the music could carry a political message. So I have no idea. But I can explain, or I can perceive that the music could carry the tension and could carry a sort of dramaturgy and could help, in fact, to understand the contrary and the tension in between people. In music, I'm very involved in contrapuntic music. The counterpoint is very important for me, and the counterpoint is people which are not speaking the same thing in the same times. And I think the music is very strong for that. So even if I am totally against what is the people are doing in Mediterranean with those people, I cannot explain how the music could carry this situation. It's very difficult, but I think it's when I am choosing those kind of elements is because a lot of people, composers, they want to make dramatic music with Dante or Shakespeare or the Greek, ancient Greek, of course. But I think we have a lot of subjects today which are very dramatic, and I think it's important that the music speak of our time.
I think that are two separate questions. What you're speaking about. The one thing is that what I was asking about also was the selection of a sujet. Like the sujet that you take is from today. They are from today's political problems. How to approach that musically, artistically, it's quite another story.
Yeah. Yes, but
in Kein Licht, I think is in a symbolic way. I think very moving is the sequence with the dog singing.
Yeah,
you have a dog, like for the people that don't know, you have introduced a dog that's a kind of sings in the opera.
Yeah. Because it's written in the book of Jelinek. The women, they have lost their husbands, their houses, their cars, and their kids, and there's a dog which are totally lost, and they say, okay, we have to take care of the dog and to be beautiful for our dogs. So I found that very interesting. And in Kalisz, in this book, in fact, Elfriede Jelinek, she never mentioned even the Fukushima. The word is never mentioned, and she mentioned some elements which we know. In fact, it was Fukushima, but mainly is what it is in the mind of the people, which is they are living this situation. It is that is the topic. So there is no I would say. I would say narration. There's no narration. It's people which are feeling something and are in some situation and discussing and thinking what the situation open in their mind and what is their difficulties. And one other aspect is in fact the technology, because the technology is the problem, because when you have this explosion of the nuclear plant, it's because they couldn't control, in fact, the technology. the technology is going alone, and they lose the control because it's too difficult. In fact, in Chernobyl, it was exactly the case. They could control technology, and that is very powerful element, because we could, in fact, use the technology in music to symbolize that. And as maybe I told you, but I use, for example, the system called the Markov chains, which is a sort of automatic system which one element will choose the next one, and it's sort of reaction in chain. And in fact, the problem in Fukushima and more in Chernobyl, it was a problem of chain reaction out of controls. So in that case, the music could be an excellent symbolization of the situation. Yeah.
So, but where does it come from? The selection of sujet, because like that's like the basic question maybe. How do you perceive this? The politicalness of art, and of your art, because your art suggests in a way that you do, but I wonder how you perceive this. If you perceive it in a way as a kind of obligation, or as it simply move you as a personality.
No, it's not a kind of obligation. No, not at all. I could write on subjects which are totally disconnected with political issue. No, and it's because you have in the both case in case of Kleinlicht, it was a book, and this book was proposed to me by the scenographer, Nicolas Stemann, because he is very close to Jelinek, and we wanted to work together. And he said, okay, maybe this book will be interesting. So I read the book, and I find a lot of things interesting for me in this book. But you have a lot of books speaking about politics which will provoke nothing for me.
Yeah, of course.
And for me, I am very like two writers are very important for me. The one is Joyce, and the other one is Beckett, to Irish, and they are totally different. Joyce was very prolific and very he developed a lot of things, and Beckett was, in contrary, doing something which was minimalist. But for both of them, and it's for me also, there's a phrase which was true: is the form is the meaning, and the meaning is the form. And if when you see or you read a book by Beckett, you can see, you understand what this is so concise, so minimalist, and when it creates a sort of tension and very, something very strong, because the form of the writing is provoking that, and that for me is important. And it could be politics, of course, but I don't consider myself as a political musician. I have my own ideas, of course, but and I will not, of course, expose some ideas which are against my direction, my thought.
I'd like to conclude this conversation with you proposing our listeners maybe with 3 pieces of you they might listen to, pieces that we might also put in the links of the podcast episode.
Yes.
If you could think of 3 pieces that you might propose the listener of
not piece of mine.
Yes, your pieces, of course.
My pieces. I would say Sound and Fury for orchestra. I will say Eludidium for voice and computer, and to find another, maybe the flute concerto.
Not an opera?
In opera, yes, it could be Kleinlicht, yes. Yeah. If it is an opera, it could be Kleinlicht.
Yeah, because I thought it was like the three fields of interest of your of interest.
Yeah, but there's the orchestra with Stone and Fury, the electronics with Eludidium, and of course the flute concerto is. Because the flute concerto is shorter and more. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let me know when it's ready.
Of course.
Okay, it was nice to talk with you.
The same. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Szymanowski Radio. Please give us a like and subscribe to our channel if you are interested in similar talks about music. Please contact us for all questions and other feedback through our mail podcast@am.katowice.pl or through our Instagram account Szymanowski Radio. Stay tuned!